Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to try to unpack this whole world of industrial pricing strategies.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah. So whether you're like, getting ready for some big meeting, or you're getting up to speed in a new field, or maybe you're just like one of those people who just can't resist, like figuring out, how those numbers on a price tag actually get there.
Right.
This one's for you. So we've got a couple of academic papers that we're going to be looking at, and they really dig into how these pricing strategies get developed and more importantly, how they actually play out like in the real world.
Yeah, that's the exciting part.
Yeah.
We're going to be going into the minds of the managers who are making these decisions day in and day out.
It's not all like theory and textbooks.
It's the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so to kind of kick things off, we need to talk about this framework that was developed by Noble and Gruca.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really a way to like understand all the different approaches that companies can take when it comes to pricing. And it's kind of like a two-level system. So first you got to figure out like, okay, what's your product situation? Is this a brand new product? Are you in like a super competitive market? Are we talking about like a whole line of products, or are we like really focused on costs?
Okay.
And then like once you figure that out, then you can dive into like specific pricing tactics within each of those scenarios.
And the amazing thing is this framework isn't just like some abstract model that academics thought up.
Right.
A study of over 270 industrial managers actually found that they use these categories to make their pricing decisions.
Oh, wow. So it's like legit.
Yeah, it's like real world stuff.
That's really cool. Okay, so let's like walk through each of these situations then. Why don't we start with new product pricing?
Sure.
That's got to be like such a thrilling moment for any company, but also super nerve-wracking, right?
Absolutely. There's so much on the line. And they've basically got three main paths that they can choose from. Skimming penetration pricing or experience curve pricing.
Okay, so let's like unpack those a little bit. So skimming, is that like like what Apple does with the iPhone? Start high, get those early adopters, and then you kind of like gradually bring the price down over time.
You got it. That's exactly it.
Okay.
It works really well when you have something that's innovative and there's not much competition, at least initially.
Yeah.
And you're banking on those early adopters not being as sensitive to the price.
Right. They just want the new thing.
They want it now. Think back to when the first iPhone came out. People were camping out in lines
Oh, yeah?
just to be the first to own one.
That's crazy. Okay, so then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got like penetration pricing.
Yeah.
And that's more about like diving right in with a low price to try to grab as much market share as you can as quickly as possible.
Exactly. It's like a land grab.
Hmm.
The idea is to discourage your competitors from even entering the market in the first place. And
Yeah.
it's especially effective in markets that are very price sensitive. Think about like a new ride-sharing app or something like that. They might use penetration pricing to come in and kind of disrupt the whole market.
So it's all about just like getting that foothold and building that momentum quickly.
Exactly.
Okay, and then the third option is experience curve pricing. This one sounds kind of intriguing. Tell me about this learning curve effect.
Yeah, so basically the more you produce something, the better and more efficient you become at it, right?
Yeah.
And this drives down your production costs, which allows you to reduce prices over time and make your product even more attractive to a wider market.
So it's like you're kind of learning as you go, and that's letting you, be more competitive.
Exactly.
Interesting. So if I'm following correctly, new product pricing is really all about picking the right strategy that aligns with your product and also with like the dynamics of the market that you're entering into.
Precisely.
Yeah, okay.
But things get even more interesting when we move on to competitive pricing strategies,
Ooh.
where companies are constantly reacting to what their rivals are doing.
So it's a pricing chess match. Okay, I remember reading about like leader parity cooperative and then like low price supplier strategies.
You got it. You're exactly right. Leader pricing is where the dominant player in the market basically sets the price and everyone else kind of falls in line. And this tends to happen in more mature markets where things are relatively stable.
So like if you're the 800-pound gorilla in the room,
Right.
you get to kind of dictate.
You set the pace.
Yeah. Okay, so parity pricing then, is that essentially like playing it safe? Like when would a company do that?
Yeah, it could be a way to avoid a price war, and maintain some kind of stability, especially if you don't have a clear cost advantage or a unique selling proposition. But things get a little more complicated when we start talking about cooperative pricing.
Yeah, that one sounds a little bit risky.
Yeah, it's definitely walking a tightrope
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, because it sounds like companies are kind of trying to coordinate to keep prices steady, but that can be like a legal gray area.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the low price supplier strategy,
Right.
which is all about leveraging your lower production costs to just undercut your competitors.
And I guess Walmart is like the classic example of that.
Yeah, textbook case.
Okay, so we've tackled like new products, we've talked about competitive markets. Now, what about when a company has multiple products? Things get a little trickier when you're dealing with product lines, especially if some of those items like complement each other or can be bundled together.
You're absolutely right. Product line pricing is all about finding that sweet spot for pricing multiple products in a way that maximizes the value for your customers and can even potentially discourage competition.
Right.
And bundling, which is where you sell several items for a single price, is a very common approach.
Yeah.
You see this all the time with things like value meals at fast food restaurants or cable packages.
Or the classic like razor and blades.
Exactly. You get people hooked on the razor at a low price, and then you make your real money on the replacement blades.
It's so smart. Okay, so all of this sounds super sophisticated, but remember that study of managers we talked about? The one where they actually like asked them what pricing method they were using?
Oh, yeah.
What was the most common one?
Cost plus pricing.
Wait, really? That's where you just like tack on a fixed markup to your costs.
That's it?
Seems so basic compared to everything else we've been talking about.
Yeah, I know, right?
It
almost seems counterintuitive, especially in markets where it might not even be the most effective strategy.
So why are they doing that?
It raises some questions for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because it's easier to justify, or there could be like organizational factors at play, or maybe they just don't have enough information about what customers are willing to pay.
So it could be that they're just using it as a default.
Or maybe even just inertia.
Okay, so we've got this really robust framework for understanding all these different pricing strategies.
Yeah.
And we've seen how they play out in these real-world scenarios.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what are those specific factors that actually guide a company to choose one strategy over another?
And that's where the real insights from that Noble and Gruca study come in.
Okay.
They didn't just ask managers about their pricing methods. They also asked them to rate the importance of different factors in their pricing decisions. And that's where things get really interesting.
So it's not just about picking a strategy from a textbook.
Right.
It's about actually understanding the market, your competition, your costs,
Absolutely.
even your own like internal dynamics.
All of it.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive into those specific factors and what the study actually uncovered. Like, for example, when it comes to new product pricing, managers often lean towards skimming when...
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
When the product is like highly differentiated, or if there's like a cost advantage because of their scale. Think about like a new piece of software with features that no one else has.
Yeah.
Or like a specialized component that only, your company can make.
So they can charge a premium because they're offering something that no one else can.
Exactly. It's all about that unique value proposition.
Okay, what about penetration pricing? When does that make the most sense?
Well, the study found that managers are more likely to use penetration pricing when the market is really price sensitive. Where like small changes in price can have a big impact on demand.
Okay.
And also when there's like high brand elasticity.
Wait, hold on. High brand elasticity, what does that even mean?
Okay, so imagine this. Think about how quickly people switch from like BlackBerry to iPhone.
Right.
That's high brand elasticity.
Yeah.
Customers are really responsive to changes in brand perception. So if you can establish yourself as a major player quickly,
Right.
you can win over customers who might otherwise have stuck with the existing brands.
So it's like using price to kind of like disrupt the market and like force your way in.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. Okay, so we've covered new product pricing. What about competitive pricing strategies? What did those managers have to say about when they use those different approaches?
Well, as we discussed, leader pricing is pretty common in mature markets where there's a clear front runner.
Right.
And the study found that companies are more likely to be the price leader when they have a cost advantage because of their size.
Makes sense.
When it's easy for everyone in the market to see price changes. And when their factories are already running at near capacity.
So if you're already the big fish in the pond and you've got those costs under control, it just makes sense to set the price and let everyone else follow.
Right. Why rock the boat?
Exactly. Okay, what about parity pricing? When does that make the most sense?
Well, parity pricing seems to be more common when costs are high.
Okay.
And there's not a lot of difference between the products in the market, and the market is already pretty mature.
Right.
It's a way to avoid a price war and keep things stable.
Makes sense. It's kind of like keeping the peace.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cooperative pricing. This is the one that always feels a little bit like you're walking on the edge.
It definitely can be. And the study showed that cooperative pricing is more likely to happen when a few large firms dominate the market
Yeah, okay.
and when demand isn't that sensitive to price changes. So companies aren't too worried about losing customers if they keep prices a bit higher.
So if everyone's already making good profits, no one wants to rock the boat.
Right.
But as you said, there are those legal risks to think about.
Definitely something to be cautious of.
Okay, so then when does the low price supplier strategy come into play?
Well, this one kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
This approach tends to be used when a company has a clear cost advantage,
Right.
maybe because of their size or they have super efficient production
Mm-hmm.
or access to cheaper raw materials.
So if you can make it cheaper, you can sell it cheaper and still make money.
Exactly.
Simple as that.
Well, in theory, yes.
Yeah.
But you also have to consider things like brand elasticity
Right.
and how much capacity you have in your factories. If you've got a strong brand and you're already running at full capacity, you might not need to be the low price leader.
That's a really good point. Okay, so we've covered new product pricing and how companies figure out pricing in those competitive markets. What about product line pricing strategies? When are companies likely to bundle products or use other tactics to manage pricing across multiple products?
Well, as you pointed out before, bundling is pretty common when companies have complementary products.
Right, like peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, exactly. And the study actually found that it's even more likely when a company sells both the main product and all of the extras that go with it,
Okay,
like the spare parts or the accessories.
interesting.
It's also more common when prices are negotiated for each sale rather than being set in advance.
Hmm.
Like when you're buying a big piece of industrial equipment,
Yeah,
it's easier to bundle in the maintenance contract and the spare parts all as one package deal.
it makes it easier for the buyer, too.
Exactly. And it can be a win-win. The buyer gets a simplified buying process and maybe a lower overall price,
Mm-hmm.
and the seller locks in more revenue and potentially edges out the competition.
So bundling can be a really powerful tool when it's used in the right way.
For sure. What about customer value pricing? When does that come into the picture?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, customer value pricing is all about setting prices based on what the customer perceives the value to be. And the study found that this approach is more common the study found that customer value pricing is more common when it would be really expensive for customers to switch to a competitor,
Hmm.
like if they're locked into a particular system or technology or something.
Okay.
It's also more common when there's a good profit margin on those supplementary sales
Right.
and when the company already has a cost advantage because of its scale.
Makes sense.
And it also seems to be more popular when even small price changes can have a big impact on demand.
Yeah, it's like if you're selling something that's really sticky, you have more leverage when it comes to pricing. And if you can make a good profit on those add-ons, well, that gives you even more flexibility.
It's exactly. It really all comes down to understanding the value proposition from the customer's perspective and then setting your prices accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
But, we've spent a lot of time talking about all these fancy pricing strategies.
Right.
But remember that study we keep coming back to? The one that said cost plus pricing is the most common method.
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
Why would companies stick with something so simple when there are all these other more, sophisticated options out there?
Well, the study offered some hints about that, too. It turns out that cost plus pricing is more common when it's really hard to predict demand, which makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know how much people are willing to pay, it's harder to use those more complex pricing models.
So it's like the default when you just don't have enough information to make a more data-driven decision.
Exactly. The study also found that cost-plus pricing is more common in markets that are growing really quickly, which suggests that when things are booming and demand is high, companies might not feel like they need to overthink their pricing.
Interesting. So maybe it's not that cost-plus pricing is always the best option, but it's often the easiest and fastest, especially when you're in a certain type of market.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay. Well, this has been a wild ride. We've gone from those high-level frameworks all the way down to the nitty-gritty of how managers make those pricing decisions. What stands out to you as the biggest takeaway from all of this?
For me, it's that pricing is about way more than just numbers. It's about really understanding what your customers value, the competitive landscape, and your own internal costs, and how all of those things interact. It's a strategic tool that can make or break a company.
Totally. And even if you're not the one setting the prices, Understanding these strategies can make you a smarter buyer. It's like you're getting a peek behind the curtain.
Absolutely. Next time you see a price tag, don't just take it at face value. Think about the strategy behind it.
This deep dive has given us a really great foundation, but we've just scratched the surface of this whole world of pricing strategy.
Oh yeah, there's so much more to explore.
So keep learning, keep digging. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the one to come up with a brand new pricing model that changes an entire industry.
And if you do come back and tell us all about it.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back for another deep dive.
Until then.
Happy pricing, everyone.